Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Ganana Antva Ganapatigum Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Ana Shrunvannutibisi Dasadanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajinivati Dhinamavidyavat. Om Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha. Shanno Bhavatvaryama. Shanna Indro Brahaspatihi. Shanno Vishnurukramaha. Namo Brahmane. Namaste Vayo. Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi. Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami. Ratam Vadishyami. Satyam vadishyami tanmamavatu tadvaktaramavatu avatu mam avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnebhih Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai istushtruvagum sastanubhihi Vyashema devahitayadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vruddashravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho arishtanemihi Swasti no Brahaspatir dadatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shuklam Baradaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasanna Vadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye. Vagishadya Sumanasaha Sarvatanam Upakrame Yam Natva Kritakrityasyu Tam Namami Gajananam. Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupine Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Vyasam Vasishtanaptaram Shakte Pautramakalmasham Parasharatmajam Vande Shukatatam Taponidhim. Vyasaya Vishnurupaya Vyasarupaya Vishnave Namo Vai Brahmanidaye Vasishtaya Namo Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganasadrisham Tattvamasyadilakshyam Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Sadgurum Tam Namami Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Yasya Sannidhi Matrena Sarve Shishyascha Sevakaha Karma Kshetre Pravartante Chinmayam Tam Namamyaham Chinmayam Tam Namamyaham Chinmayam Tam Namamyaham. Hari Om everybody, welcome back. Let's do a quick recap of where we have come to so far. We started with several aspects of our culture, our Adhyatma Samskriti, our Bhautika Samskriti, about the pursuit of happiness in general, and most importantly, we learned about Shreya, Preya, Viveka. Then we started about the classification of our Shastras, Shruti, Smriti, Itihasa, and Puranas, and Vedas as the basis of our culture and our source book. We called it the Apurusheya Grantha, that it is not a man-made entity. There were three subdivisions of Vedas, the Karma Kanda, the Upasana Kanda, and the Gnana Kanda. And their purpose is that of purification of mind, Chitta Shuddhi, Chitta Ekagrata, the single pointed focus that is leading to the knowledge of the self. Then we learned about Karma Siddhanta, which is the basis for reincarnation, the types of karma, the Nitya karma, Dainitika karma, etc., and how to divinize our actions. That is, how to turn karma to karma yoga. We learned about Kayaka karma, Vachika karma, and Manasika karma through puja, japa, chintanam. Then we learned how to divinize our emotions, called bhakti, making the mind single pointed, to gain chitta ekagrata. leading from Saguna Sakara Brahma to Nirguna Nirakara Brahma. Then we started our journey to Jnana Kanda, the knowledge portion of the Vedas. It is also called as Upanishads, also called as Vedanta. That is where our main focus has been. We learned the meaning of Upanishad, the significance of Guru Shishya Parampara. We learned a little bit about Shad Darshanas, the 6 schools of Vedanta. We learned about Prasthana Trayi, the Shruti Prasthana, the Smriti Prasthana, and then Nyaya Prasthana in Brahma Sutras. We learnt about the 4 sample Mahavakyas leading to the ultimate reality of Brahman. In our symbolism topic, we have been learning a symbol or two. We learnt about the temple and the burning of the camphor. Then we covered the 4 aspects of the deity. And we took Lord Narayana and Lord Shiva as examples. We learnt a little bit about Dharma Shastra, Manusmriti, Chaturvida Lakshana of Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, a set of 10 universal values, Varnashrama Dharma. Then in that we also studied a little bit about the Dhyana Shloka of Vishnu Sahasranam. Then we covered Gunatraya Viveka, the 3 gunas of Tamo Guna, Rajo Guna and Sattva Guna. How this has veiled our divinity. Then we talked about Varnashrama Dharma, understood the broad classification of Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya and Shudra based on guna and karma and not on janma. We understood how the body and mind and intellect equipment, the one which our Puja Gurudev used as BMI chart, and we learned that the BMI, the body, mind, intellect is Jada, and how the self, which is of the nature of Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa, is veiled because of our vasanas. That gives us a sense of limitation, a sense of finitude. And then we moved into the Pancha Kosha Viveka. We discussed Lord Shiva in our symbolism topic. And in the last class, I've been talking about the 5 koshas. That is where we were. The Annamaya Kosha or the food sheath, the Pranamaya Kosha or the vital air sheath, the Manomaya Kosha or the mental sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha, the intellectual sheath, and Anandamaya Kosha, that is the closest to Atman or the bliss sheath. We learned that the Annamaya Kosha is the outermost precinct of the 5 koshas. It is born out of Annam, sustained by Annam, and becomes Annam when it perishes. Identified with Annamaya Kosha, I say I am fat, I am thin, I am a man, I am a woman. All these are body level identifications. Then we learnt about the Pranamaya Kosha. We have 5 Vayu Vikaras: Prana, Apana, Udana, Samana, and Vyana. When we identify with our Pranamaya Kosha, we say we are hungry, we are thirsty, etc. Then we have Manomaya Kosha, mental sheet. Identified with Manomaya Kosha, I usually say I am happy, I am sad, etc. All the emotional responses. Then we covered the intellectual sheet, Vijnanamaya Kosha. Identified with Vijnanamaya Kosha, I say I am intelligent, I am dull, etc. Then we understood the final sheet, which is the bliss sheet or Anandamaya Kosha. We talked about the Taratamya, the gradations of happiness associated with it, called Koshananda. To understand how to transcend the sheets, I gave you 2 logic of Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji, the Atma Anatma Viveka and Druk Drushya Viveka. We said Madiyatvena Gnatam Atma Na Bhavati. The neti approach, not this, not this. And by that negation of what I am not, I arrive at what cannot be further negated. That is the principle. And pretty much in this diagram, we have covered all the 5 concentric circles, and in one class I will cover the nature of Atman. And now let us move to this triangular part of it. And if you can see this, the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body. Sharira Traya. We will cover that aspect of it today. Okay. And we will start with what we call as the 3-body approach, the same koshas, and we will see how these 3 bodies, the Sharira Traya in Vedanta, can be equated to the sheets, the Panchakosha, and also to Avastha Traya, 3 avasthas. Let's start with the outermost precinct, the gross body, that which is tangible to us. It is called as Stula Sharira or gross body. Every one of us who have been through a basic biology class know that the gross body is made up of, it's covered in a beautiful leather bag called the skin, and within it, it has the flesh, blood vessels, fat, bone marrow, etc. And it has limbs such as hands, head, legs. Sharira. Siryamanatvat shariram. That which disintegrates into space, air, fire, water, and earth. These are called as Pancha Mahabhutas, or basic elements, from which it has been created. And I will explain that process today. When we take up a text of Tattva Bodha or Atma Bodha, or texts like Panchadashi from Vidyaranya Swami, I will explain the process of Panchikarana as to how different elements come together to form different parts of the body, and each of them have their own presiding deity. So this gross body can be perceived by the senses as well as by others. Hence it is called as Stula Sharira. We call it gross body. Some people call it gross body because it is like nothing but filth inside. Adi Shankaracharya ji gives 4 important aspects for Stula Sharira or gross body. Number 1, it is made up of 5 great elements, Pancha Mahabhuta. I will take each one separately and explain. It is born out of good actions of the past. These are the 4 criteria for the creation of the gross body. It is a counter for experiences. And I will explain the details of that, what he means by that. And it is subject to 6 modifications. So this food sheet or the gross body is equated to their one and the same. In some Vedantic texts, they include Pranamaya Kosha as a part of the gross body also. But we'll take each one individually. So the gross body is made up of these 5 great elements, Pancha Mahabhuta. They are ether or space, air, fire or Agni, water, and earth, Prithvi, Amsha. These are called Pancha Mahabhutas. If you are talking to somebody today, how did this come about? This is the process through which it comes about. It is called as Panchikarana. If you are talking to somebody outside of this class today and they ask you, what did you study in Vedanta today. You tell them Panchikarana process, they may not get very curious about it. You tell them that you studied pentamerous self-duplication and mutual combination. They will say, wow. So I will explain this 5-step process through this chart. I am positive that you will not come back for the next class. So basically in this chart, the 5 elements were by themselves. Then they split it into half. And the split is complete in the 3rd step. And each of them borrow an element from the other. And the process of grossification is complete. But let us explain that differently. So there are 5 basic elements, Pancha Mahabhutas. And let us take this example that will make it simpler. We will say that there were 4 boys and a girl who were friends. Let us call space, instead of space, we will call that boy Akash. Next is air, and instead of that, we will call that boy as Pavan. Then we have the fire element or Agni, and we will call that boy's name as Tejas. Then there is earth, and we will call that boy as Prithvi. And we will call the water as a girl Jalaja. So 4 boys and a girl who were friends, Akash, Pavan, Tejas, Prithvi, and Jalaja. And each of them had $2 with them. $1 and 4 quarters. Each of them painted different colors and kept it. Which one? The $1. Akash painted it white. Pavan painted it yellow, as you can see in the chart. Tejas painted it red, the $1 bill. Jalaja painted it blue, and Prithvi painted it green. And each of those quarters also, they had the same paint. And each of them, they gave 1 quarter to each other. So each half combined with a quarter from each other. Totally, they had $2. So they still continue to have $2, but each quarter from each other. This is called, in short, a Panchikarana process. It is also called as the grossification of the tamasic aspect of subtle elements. These subtle elements are called as tanmatras. So this combination and permutation of these subtle elements constitute the entire gross world we perceive. That is about Panchikarana process. Without going, this is a very high level introduction. So I'm going to just leave it there. And the next aspect of the gross body is that it is born out of good actions of the past. Satkarma Janyam. Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji in Vivek Chudamani says, Narajanma Durlabhamataha. It is considered a special blessing to have a human body because we have the power of the discrimination. Not only to think dharma and adharma, good and bad on the moral plane, but also to think nitya and anitya. What is real and what is unreal. Only in human body we can think beyond the Darwinian world, as we are the crown jewel of creation, endowed with that sukshma buddhi, that subtle intellect. So that nitya anitya viveka, that is an important aspect of human endeavor. Then Shankaracharya ji says, the stula sharira or the gross body is a counter for experiences. It is called as sukha dukkha adi bhoga ayatanam. It is like a counter of experience. Just like in a shop, the transaction takes place at the counter. The transaction with the world happens with the outer world, with these 9 outlets. Bhagavat Purana calls this counter Navadvara Pura. It says Navadvara Pure Dehi. There are 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 1 anus, 1 reproductive organ. Then the body, the gross body, stula sharira, it is subject to 6 modifications. Shad vikaravat. Number 1, asti. It exists. How? It exists in a fetal form. The mother begins to experience the changes, and the doctor confirms it through ultrasound or any other medical means nowadays. Then the second modification, jayate. It is born. The fetus develops and is born after a period of gestation. Number 3, vardate. It grows. It gets nourished by annam and starts to grow. Viparimate. It constantly changes. It discards the old cells, builds a new texture, suffers through many diseases, undergoes many modifications from a childhood body to youth body, youth to the old age, so on. And then it begins to decay, apakshiyate. In due course of time, it starts to weaken. It loses its strength. It loses its vitality. And then the 6th modification, it vinashyati, it perishes. It disintegrates and goes back to become the Pancha Mahabhutas, the constituent elements. So the 6 modifications of the gross body are asti, jayate, vardate, viparimate, apakshiyate, and vinashyati. Everybody. So from a gross body standpoint, we can say it is active during Jagrad Avastha, waking state. Identifying with this body, one comes to experience the waking state. Generally, some people, even though they are in the waking state, even in a lecture I have seen, they go into this daydream or into some even to deep sleep. And the identification of the ego in this waking state is termed as Vishwa. And from a kosha standpoint, Stula Sharira or the gross body is Annamaya Kosha. When we recap today, I will kind of explain it through the chart. Our Gurudev, Puja Gurudev, used to give this example from Viveka Chudamani to describe us as human beings who has 5 senses through this shloka from Vivek Chudamani, number 76. Shabdadibhih pancha vireva pancha panchatvamapu svagunena baddhaha kuranga matanga patanga meena Brunganarah pancha biranchita kim Shabdadibhih pancha vireva pancha panchatvamapuh svagunena baddhaha kuranga matanga patanga meena Brunganarah pancha viranchita kim. In this, 5 animals are taken. Each of them they have one weakness, they have one sense, and that sense they have weakness for. He takes in this the deer. The deer is fascinated by the melodious sound. And walks in the direction of the music because of that weakness, and becomes the target for the hunter. Elephant. Elephant has a weakness for touch, especially during mating season. That sense of touch, and it falls prey to that one sense it has weakness for. And the moth. The moth flutters towards that light. And because it gets attracted to that sense of color, falls prey to it. And the fish. Fish is known for its gluttony. Falls prey because of that weakness, because of its hunger. And the honeybee gets attracted to the fragrance of that flower. And Adi Shankaracharya ji says in this shloka, we call it Kaimutika Nyaya in Vedanta, what to talk of. These 5 animals have died because they tied to one of the 5 senses through attachment. What to talk of man? What is in store for him who is attached to all the 5 senses? A very powerful shloka to keep us in line, to keep senses under check. That is enough for on the gross body. We will move on to the subtle body. So remember, we are on the topic of Sharira Traya Viveka. So the subtle body, the vital air sheath, Pranamaya Kosha, mental sheath, Manomaya Kosha, and intellectual sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha, all 3 together from a Vedantic standpoint is called as Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. It is Bhoga Sadhanam, an instrument of experience. Adi Shankaracharya ji gives 4 important aspects for Sukshma Sharira or subtle body. Number 1, again, it is made up of 5 subtle elements. It constitutes 17 limbs. How? We have 5 Gnanendriyas or 5 organs of perception, 5 Karmendriyas, or 5 organs of action, 5 pranas, that makes it up to 15, mana, buddhi, so it constitutes 17. Sometimes mana and buddhi are further broken down into memory, chitta, or ahankara, ego. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. In short, it is an instrument of experience. It is for bhoga sadhanam. And they are also born out of good karmas of the past. 4 criteria. The 3 bodies we are in the subtle body, they can be equated to swapna avastha or the dream state. It is unique to subtle body, sukshma sharira, because mind creates a world of its own in the dream state. And dreams are often caused by suppressed thoughts and unfulfilled desires of the waking state. Identified with this dreamer ego, the self is called as Taijasa. In the waking state, he was called as Vishwa. In the dream state, he is called as Taijasa. And from a kosha standpoint, subtle body is pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha combined. So the dreamer may dream of a tiger chasing him in the dream, and the paws may be closing in behind his shoulder. However strange and ridiculous it may seem to the waker, it seems real as long as you are in that dream state. So in Vedanta, the dream state is often used to explain the impermanence of this world. The moment you wake up from the dream, the entire thing is gone. Now, think this Jagrad Avastha or this waking state that we are in is that of a long dream for us to wake up to that new absolute reality. That takes us to the next body in Shariratraya Viveka called the Causal Body. Karana Sharira. It is known as Karana Sharira because it is the cause of the subtle and the gross body. It is Karana Sharira, Sharira Dvaya Karanam, because it is the cause for Stula Sharira and Sukshma Sharira. It consists of vasanas or our inner inherent tendencies in an unmanifest form. It is of the nature of ignorance. Avidya Rupam. It is called as Anadi, beginningless. Even for Brahman, we say he is Anadi Ananta. But here, the Karana Sharira is only Anadi because it has an Anta. It has an end. Once the knowledge comes in, it ends. Avidya ends. It is called as an inexplicable phenomena, anirvachaniya or anirvachya. And it is free from thought modifications. Nirvikalpa Rupam. Because when the individual identifies with Karana Sharira, he is in deep sleep. Even if there is a single thought, he is awake. He is not in deep sleep. And he cannot be in the dream state. For him to be in deep sleep, there cannot be any thought modification. So the world of plurality of the external world has folded down. There is no internal world. It is homogeneous experience of nothingness. And we call it as Ajnana Nidra. Maybe that is where the term ignorance is bliss came from. Ignorance is not bliss in Vedanta, but in deep sleep. Because the individual is in a state of ignorant bliss called Sushupti Avastha. This Koshananda, this Anandamaya Koshananda is that sleep. And that dreamer ego, deep sleeper ego, is called Prajna. So, in this chart, we can see that there is consciousness working through the gross body, he becomes the waker. Working through the subtle body, he becomes the dreamer. And the causal body, he becomes the deep sleeper. And that individual jiva is that same consciousness. So just to summarize, I put together a small chart. So the Jagrad Avastha or the waking state, the identification is with the Sthula Sharira or the gross body, and the ego is called Vishwa. And the experience is both of external world and internal world. Then you have the Swapna Avastha or the dream state, identification with the Sukshma Sharira or the subtle body. Ego identified with it is called Taijasa. Only internal world experience because the dream is created by the mind. Then you have the Sushupti Avastha or the deep sleep state, identification with the causal body or the Karana Sharira. Ego is called as Prajna. There is a complete absence of both external world and the internal world. This chart gives us how the 5 sheets, from a terminology standpoint, the Annamaya Kosha, or the physical sheet, is equated to the gross body. The vital air sheet, Pranamaya Kosha, mental sheet and intellectual sheet, to the subtle body, and the bliss sheet, or the Anandamaya Kosha, to the causal body. And the self is beyond all these sheets. We also can equate the same thing through our Gurudev's BMI chart, and the vasanas are the causal body, the conditional experience, and because of that, other identifications come, and the self is beyond all these body, mind, intellect, and the vasanas. So we have covered all the 5 concentric circles identified in this chart. We have covered food sheet, which is the gross body. We have covered the vital air sheet, mental sheet, and intellectual sheet, which is the subtle body, and the causal body as the bliss sheet today. Now, in our symbolism topic, because Deepavali is coming up in the next 2 weeks, I wanted to cover that aspect of it today in our symbolism topic of lighting a lamp. In almost all Hindu households, we light a lamp twice a day, at dawn and at dusk. And on all auspicious occasions, celebrations, we light a lamp. Light symbolizes knowledge. Darkness symbolizes ignorance. I don't know the significance of the blowing of the candle. In our culture, we don't put the light away. Because knowledge removes ignorance, just like light removes darkness. One may ask, why a lamp, not a light bulb? The traditional wick lamp that I am showing in the picture has more spiritual significance. The oil or the ghee in that lamp symbolizes our vasanas, our negative tendencies, and the wick represents that ego. When we lit that lamp through that spiritual knowledge, the vasanas get exhausted and the ego perishes. So that flame of the lamp, if you notice, is always pointing towards the higher ideal. A single lamp can light hundreds more, just like the man of knowledge, can inspire many more, but the light of the lamp that lights does never get diminished, even after lighting many more. When we say the Shanti mantra, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrutyorma Amritam Gamaya, from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. When we say, lead me from unreal to the real, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death to immortality. This is a true prayer, very appropriate for our topic of discussion. Here, the seeker is admitting his sense of limitedness. Here, the seeker is his heartfelt cry for assistance in his transcendence. It is not a prayer for things of the transactional world. It is not a prayer for food. It is not a prayer for shelter, health, partnership, riches, success, fame, glory, or even for heaven. One who recites these three mantras has realized that such things are impermanent, soaked in pain, even in abundance, forever leaving him wanting for more. So it is with this full understanding that one turns to this form of prayer. The essence of each of these three mantras is the same. O Guru, help me free myself from these sundry misunderstandings regarding myself, regarding the universe, regarding God. Bless me with this true knowledge of the self. That is the essence of that prayer. With that, we'll conclude today. We'll revisit next week, same time, same place. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you, everybody.